I'm going to be doing it's not some, well, it is a review, but this is a recommendation, a film recommendation. It is for A History of Violence, which is a 2005 film, and I believe it's the first time that Viggo Mortensen worked under the direction of one of my favourite directors, David Cronenberg. It's a movie that I think got more critical acclaim than it did. It didn't really get much. I don't think it got a great deal of attention from the general cinema-going public. But then, you know, aside from a couple of exceptions, Cronenberg's work I think, is a bit too on the edge anyway to really sort of get accepted into what we call the mainstream. History of Violence is the first time that I've seen Cronenberg truly go really quite sort of, you know, in the grand scheme of his catalogue of work, it's probably his most accessible film. And I think some people, fans particularly at the time, might have thought that meant that History of Violence wasn't going to be as good as a Cronenberg film, and on the contrary, it's actually, you know, it's arguably my favourite David Cronenberg film. This is a guy called Tom Stall runs a coffee shop. He has done for some time in a quiet town, and the shop is visited by these criminals, and in an unprecedented act of bravery and extreme violence, Tom becomes a local hero. He is visited not long after by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Fogarty. Apologies for the sudden cut. I've been provided refreshments. So Mr. Fogarty is clearly a bad guy, and he's come to demand that this guy admit he's not who he says he is and answer to a different name, believing completely that he's found some, you know, some bloke from his own past. Now, it's the calling into question of the identity of this guy that is the, you know, sort of sets the scene for this, what I consider to be a classic. Not only is it a classic, but it's a classic Cronenberg film. The film's strengths, first of all, is numerous. First of all, there's not a weak link in the whole cast, and somebody that I took particular notice of at the time was Tom's son in it. Now, I don't know the actor's name, but have a look, you'll find it on IMDb. He plays Jack, and he is excellent. He's really, really good. In actual fact, the family unit in it, Viggo Mortensen, Maria Bello, and this guy who plays Jack, they are a family. It's really so convincing. You know, she may as well be married to Viggo. It's really, really, really good representation of family, of quiet family life. Ed Harris plays Mr. Fogarty. He is, you know, I'll watch anything with Ed Harris because he's such a screen presence anyway. He's such a powerful, you know, I do think Ed Harris will play anything and will play it 100% perfect. I've never seen Ed Harris, even in films that I don't really like, I've never seen Ed Harris turn in a less than 100%, you know, heartfelt performance. So then we also have, in a role that can't take up much more than 10 minutes screen time, we've got William Hurt playing a role that he's never, I don't think he's ever been anything like this before, and he does almost steal the film. I only say almost because then we have Viggo Mortensen, who gives a really, really clever, studied performance, and just how clever and studied it is, you don't really recognise until you watch it again, and the film will benefit. You will get benefits from watching the film numerous times. You'll really see just how good Viggo is, and I think, I mean, since seeing that film, I've sung Viggo Mortensen's praises very highly. I think he has come to prove himself a really good, powerful actor, and he understands understated performance in a way that echoes the likes of De Niro and Spacey. Now, I talk about it being a classic Cronenberg film, and I'm talking specifically, I suppose, at the moment to you Cronenberg fans. And if you're not into directors, or you simply don't know who David Cronenberg is or why that's significant, he deals with themes throughout all his work that his films tend to hold hands. He's very concerned with, if you've ever heard the expression body horror, he's sort of the maestro when it comes to films that deal with identity and the horror coming from inside. Make it about the duality of human nature and all those kind of really those issues that all come from inside. And he's known for visual metaphor and to sort of express and explore all those things. And of course, in this film, unsurprisingly, violence. The theme of violence being fundamental to the human condition. Join those other things. Somebody once made the comment when watching A History of Violence, an 18, I would add. They said this film is very violent, and I had to sort of point out that's a bit of a redundant statement. I just want to talk about the other themes, the identity theme, and the idea of there being a duality to a human being. It's really explored nicely by two sex scenes in the film that Cronenberg put in himself. The first is this really nice, really lovely love scene between this couple that really show you how good and beautiful and fun sex should be. And then there is a second scene later on in the film that is a juxtaposition to it that really challenges the audience. From a technical perspective, there really isn't anything wrong with the film. It looks great. Cronenberg is so good now as a filmmaker that he can just deal with any tone and put them all into a film and make it all work without ever feeling wrong. For such a serious film, there's one scene in the movie that if you didn't know better, you could believe Tarantino had written it. But the whole movie's done so well that it doesn't stand out as out of place or anything. The movie is funny, it's dark, it's erotic, it's violent, and it's emotional, and he manages to just put this all together without anything ever seeming forced in or wrong. It's, in that sense, it's perfect. So the violence in the film, for anybody concerned about that element, it is hard. It's quite messy and abrupt, but it's not what I would call gratuitous. It always works perfectly well within, it serves what's going on. And of course, importantly, coming back to that theme of violence being, what Cronenberg is quite interested in is how we applaud and cheer violence, and he seems to want to address that in this film. Now, making an audience complicit in an act of violence in a film isn't original. We can all think of directors who are famous for that, but I liked seeing it done in this movie because Cronenberg we understand that the violence is necessary. All the violence in this film is necessary, but he also wants you to understand the how you relate to that. He wants you to see what you're cheering, and he wants you to understand the result. The film makes the point that all violence, no matter how necessary, should stay with you, and it should change you, and it should never be a light subject. You could look at this film as an argument against those more slapstick movies that make light of violence and sort of brush over it as though it's nothing. but I think that's going a bit deep with it. I don't think Cronenberg was necessarily doing that. I just think that in this film, he's definitely concerned with the fact violence is in us. It's important. It's part of everyone. Everyone's capable of it, and pushed to the right point. But don't think that just because something is justified that it doesn't have its effects. And that's really something that he wants to look at with this movie. I've heard there's been a lot of, at the time there was a lot of discussion about the ending amongst some friends of mine, and I can understand how this ending, if you've not really been paying attention to the film, or you're not used to this sort of ending, it could feel kind of empty and ultimately pointless. But I think I remember the discussion at the time between some friends. The first time they'd seen it, they thought it was pointless. Since then, I've discussed this movie with them. That was some time ago, and without exception, anyone who thought it pointless the first time round now actually really likes the film and sees the point of the ending. And it's in its own very subtle, quiet way, it's actually a very emotional ending. It's an open end, so without spoiling the film, if you're not into open-ended stories, this isn't a film for you. It definitely leaves you to go, well, it's a what now sort of thing. But I think there's a lot being said in the ending without any dialogue whatsoever, and that's why I say, if you're not into that kind of subtle, more I guess sort of, if you're not into reading subtext and you're not into taking away from a film what you want to take away from to think about, if you just want a nice, here's the ending, this is what happened, done, kind of thing, all the loose ends sort of tied up, and that it's not a movie for you. But in every other way, it's excellent. If you can stomach some scenes of quite strong violence, it's just a really, really, really powerful, thought-provoking piece of storytelling. And like I said towards the beginning, it's probably Cronenberg at his most accessible, because he's not known for, just to give an idea, if you know films like Scanners, Dead Ringers, if you know Existence, Spider, Crash in the 90s, I think that was banned in certain parts of in Westminster, certainly, and I think it still is, apparent from what I hear. So he's not one for easy storytelling, and it's not the sort of thing you would normally, on paper, you might not have expected a director like that to go for. But if you haven't seen it already, or if you were put off at the time, or you've kind of had your doubts about it, or you just haven't bothered, or indeed, most certainly, if you haven't heard of it, see it. It's really good. And if you're not a Cronenberg fan, but from what I've said, you're interested in finding out more, this is a really good starting point. It's probably the most accessible point for, to get into. If you're looking to get into a new director, I can't recommend Cronenberg enough. And do so before his next film comes out, which I believe is later this year, again with Viggo Mortensen. He's worked with him 3 times now. They've got a bit of a Scorsese, De Niro sort of relationship going on, and I'm all for that. They work really well together. Highly recommended. 10 out of 10. History of Violence. Superb. Check it out.